And now we have recording on the good thing to get started because I'm going to start off by lying to you. I'm going to lie to you and tell you that I didn't prepare anything for this, that we are completely winging it. That's entirely an act. I prepared plenty of stuff, but it works with the drama of this, of what I'm going for. So hopefully you can see my shared screen. I've got our nice little Stevenson thing up on the right and ChatGPT up on the left. And I am going to start a stopwatch on this, and I'm going to say, uh-oh, I totally forgot to prepare for this talk. So I'm going to go to ChatGPT, and I'm going to say, acting as an expert. And I got to look over my computer here because I'm not that tall. Can you outline a presentation to give a seminar to faculty on how academics can use ChatGPT and other AI tools to aid their research and teach in the classroom? And I'll actually even leave that with all of my bad typing in there to see what it comes up with for me. And that's going to hopefully help us in what's there. Now, ChatGPT from OpenAI is a language model. It basically does most of its stuff on predictive text. So it's going to statistically figure out what the next best word is. So a lot of things out of it are very predictive. It's going to be processing as we're dealing with it. Like a lot of this, what I'm going to talk about is ChatGPT. There are a couple of other tools that are out there. Bard is what Google's going with, a bunch of other tools, but OpenAI really has kind of the first big step. Microsoft just put $10 billion more into them, has incorporated it with Bing, and if you're on the wait list, you can get chat in Bing sometime in the next week or so. So let's see how we did. Oh, we're up to a conclusion. So I'm at 1 minute and 45, 47 seconds. I'm hoping it comes in at under 2 to make this sound really good. It did. 1 minute and 53 seconds. I got an entire outline for this talk. I like that. That's pretty quick. That actually is a lot quicker than it took for me to write this stuff down ahead of time. But I could go through, I could read it, I could edit it, I could do that stuff. But again, sticking with our kind of half-assing things, kind of taking the spirit of a college student in here, I am going to copy and paste this right from the introduction. I'm going to go over here. I'm going to go to Beautiful.ai. Beautiful.ai is another AI tool. I'm going to say, let's create a new presentation. I'm going to go to Designer.ai. In the description of the presentation, I am going to copy and paste all of that stuff from ChatGPT. I'm going to say, generate presentation. We'll go with the classic look. Say, create presentation. I got about 2 minutes. Again on that one. So we're at 3 minutes. It's doing it for me. In that, oh, it's even going quicker. Last time I did this, it took almost the full 2 minutes. So that's up there. We're going to come back to that in a second. I wasn't expecting it to be that fast. I have a full slide deck off of an outline to give this presentation on in 3 minutes and 17 seconds. That means I could have started prepping for this at 3:25, and I still would have seemed like I knew what I was talking about by 3:30 or 2:30, if I remember the time zones we are in. So what I was going to do with the 2 minutes, which now I apparently don't need, is I was going to come over. Oh, I just closed it. I was going to come over and say, you know what? I need an introduction for myself because we jumped right into this. I don't know a lot of you and you don't know who I am, or maybe you do. I don't know what type of internet stalking you do of people. If you do, that's bad of you. You shouldn't do that. But I do it too, so don't worry about it. So I'm going to come down. I'm going to grab my LinkedIn bio. Again, we're going to do a little copy and pasting. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say, can you write a script introducing the speaker for the presentation above based on this bio. Pop it in, and it's going to give me a script to work off of. Again, this is going to give that information. Hopefully, a lot of you are comfortable talking in front of people. You don't need to worry about it. But again, it's saving me time. I'm getting to sit here. I'm getting to talk with you. It's doing the work for us. And I'm a little lazy. I love people doing work for me. So this here, again, is a script. I'd wait and save this, but I'm going to skip it over. I can copy and paste that over. Again, you'll notice there's a lot of copying and pasting going on over here. And I am going to do that into DeepWord. DeepWord is another AI tool. I can go create new. Oh, come on, I don't want to log back in. This is going to be the longest part of this entire thing, is me logging back in. There we go. So I would go to create new. It's going to yell at me. Well, this is why I went through and I prepped this one ahead of time. Normally I go to create new. It's going to give me an option of who I want to be talking about. I'm going to be able to put in a script. I would copy and paste this here as the script over there. And this took about 4 minutes earlier in the day for it to process.
Good evening, everyone. I am honored to be here today and speaking to such a wonderful group of colleagues and friends. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Jason Cherubini.
And you could go through on the rest of it, but I think you get the feel. We don't need that robotic talk. And this is the free one. There are much better tools available if you want fancier pieces of what happens to be there. So again, we're now sitting at 2:37. In 7 minutes, I was able to get an outline, create slides, script an introduction, get an introductory video, and now we can get started. Not a bad use of my 7 minutes. I'm not sure how many classes you guys have to prep. I'm not sure how many lectures you prep. I'm not sure how much you like updating what's there. But for me, it takes a lot longer than 7 minutes, or it did until about 2 months ago when these tools started becoming very popular. So what I kind of want to talk about today, again, I'm still so happy I can prep all of this stuff in 8 minutes to get started, is leveraging a lot of these tools in academics in general. So where it can help your life as a faculty member, as a researcher, and how you can use it in the classroom, both the good and the bad of what's there. So as I said a minute ago, ChatGPT is the popular one. ChatGPT, when it rolled out end of November, early December, made it to 1 million users in 5 days, the fastest of any platform that we've seen. So it really brought things to the forefront, but it's not the first. We had some more professional level tools, things like Jasper AI, that have been out for a while, that have helped with a lot of this writing. OpenAI really pushed ChatGPT after what happened with Lensa in the fall. Lensa.ai does, if you uploaded like 10 pictures of yourself, it would do AI renderings of what you look like. And it took a lot of the social media by storm. OpenAI decided to jump on board, put ChatGPT out there, and this is technically GPT-3 of what's available. So this is really popular. We have a lot of other tools around it. So while we'll be referencing ChatGPT, we're not limited there. So what I kind of want to talk about in this is the benefits of using this in the classroom, some of the potential drawbacks, because that's where I think so many in academia go to, but also where is this beneficial to you? If a lot of this sounds like a sales pitch, it kind of is. I'm drinking the AI Kool-Aid. I am definitely a zealot for it. I think it is the single biggest game changer of technology in my lifetime. And that's including having gone through the advent of the internet and the popularization of e-commerce and all of that. This is dramatic and it's quick. I mean, we're in the third month of it. So this is going to be just more and more popular. So I think the best place to kind of sell academics on the AI, if I didn't sell you on how quickly you could do notes, how quickly you could do outlines, how quickly you could have it write an introduction, how quickly you could have it write reference letters for your students, how you could use it to have different prompts, different issues for your classroom, it's going to be what it saves you in time in research. Because some of the tools that are out there are, well, phenomenal. They're mind-boggling on what we have. So the first one I kind of want to show to you, and I'm going to jump over here, is what's called litmaps. Litmaps.com or app.litmaps.com is, I think, a phenomenal way to start your literature review. Essentially, it's going to give you a visual representation of where a particular paper you care about is connected to other papers. And it's going to allow you then to track back and forwards to see what is there. Litmaps is a free tool. I believe you can sign in with your Google account for it, but easy one. So I pulled the DOI for a paper I did about a decade ago to use as an example of this. Click on it. It's going to pull up the information, everything we cited in it, all of the other papers that happen to be there. So I can now look at where this paper stood. Again, it's a paper I wrote, but if I was researching a new topic, I could find a paper I like in that new topic and say, well, who did they reference directly? Go to the papers behind them. Well, where did they reference? And work your way back to see what the foundational research was that got there. Or you can work your way forward from that paper you found to see what happens after that. Who else has cited it since on what happens to be there? You can then click and see what they are. You can add them to collections. We can get through and see the information, what references were associated. For me, again, huge time saver on being able to dig through the research and to see how things are connected. And I'm a very visual person, so this I find really helpful. There's another one called Cite. This one I have not used. This is a paid one to use, but I've been hearing nothing but good things about it in terms of using it for the research. And if this is something using of AI in academic writing is something that interests you, there is a gentleman by Mushtaq Bilal. He's out of the Netherlands, I believe, and he has some phenomenal threads on the new tools as they become available. So there's basically a new thread, give or take, every day on how new tools are used. And they're not just AI tools. He goes in a lot of other directions. But the last couple of weeks, he's been very heavy on the AI tools, which I find very useful and interesting. And I'll put all of this in the chat at the end, just so there's a nice, easy record of it. So Cite is one of them I haven't used. He's recommended it greatly. Honestly, at this point, I've been a little too cheap to, I think it's $20 a month to go for it while I'm not actively using it. So I'll probably play with it at one point. Another one I really like is Research Rabbit. And again, too late for me to go in. I have to re-log in. And this is another place where you can put in a paper and get just a ton of information what's there. So this is the same paper I had just had on Litmaps a few minutes ago. We're going to be able to see similar works, all references, all citations. We can export papers. We can get shareable links on what's there. But easy, I can jump to similar papers, see what else is available, and jump around. So for me, I think that stuff is great in terms of time savings on my research as I'm digging up what's available and what happens to be there. these are not the only tools. I know I've said that before, but new tools are coming out every day. And I think it would be a full-time job just to keep track of all of the different ones. A lot of them have overlap. So like Litmaps and Research Rabbit right here, we can see that they both have similar visual representations that you can use, and you may have a benefit of one or the other on what happens to be there. But again, both useful as ways to get there. So I think that is such a phenomenal tool. There's also a bunch of different tools that are starting to come to the market that actually help you read academic papers themselves. And in addition to that, even if you just wanted to use ChatGPT, you can pull sections of an academic paper, ask ChatGPT to summarize it or explain it in more regular English, which helps my dumb self at times. And when I move away from the academic lingo and I can just read what they're trying to get at, I've also found that's extremely beneficial for students where they may get bogged down in the reading of the research, but if they can go through and get the main points of it by having it restated, reworded, re-explained in a different format through ChatGPT or one of these other tools, it's more accessible, which then gives them the stepping stone to read the research directly after the fact. So again, I think there's a lot of benefits on research on what it can do and make things easier. Teaching is, I was going to say teaching is probably where there's the most kind of hemming and hawing, but I don't think that's it. I think people are worried about students using it instead of thinking. I think a lot of people haven't necessarily thought about how to use it in the context of teaching itself. So in one of our meetings, our department meetings, what I did for our meeting and what I've done for a lot of my writing is I actually took my phone using a voice recording app called Otter.ai. It records and goes to transcript. There's plenty of transcript apps. That just happens to be the one I like. But while we were having the meeting, I put it to transcript. It recorded our entire conversation, put it in transcript form. I could then drop it in ChatGPT. ChatGPT could then give me a summary. It could give me meeting notes. Everything was laid out right there that we could then share what was available. I found this exceptionally useful in the classroom for students when they're having their meetings, because nobody wants to play secretary. And honestly, even if somebody did, they're probably going to miss things. So when I have students break out into groups, I have them record what they're talking about. Don't take notes, just record what's there. You can then get the transcripts of it, of what's available. You can dump it into ChatGPT. You can ask it for a summary of what you talked about. You can ask it for meeting notes, and that way you have something easily distributable among the team. Where I've tied that in with other tools with my classes is if you have one person upload that transcript to a Google Doc that everyone in the team has access to, they can then add their own notes based on what they've thought about after the fact. So you go from a voice recording that doesn't interfere with their meeting at all to a transcript where a raw transcript can be a little difficult to read for anyone who's worked with it. We're turning it into real meeting notes of what happened, including summaries and other information that can then be shared in a multi-person document like a Google Doc that everyone's then able to put their notes on. And we have a living, breathing document for that team that didn't interfere with their meeting that they're then able to add extra tools on. Again, to me, that's a wonderful use of what happens to be there. Taking that to a personal side for where I use that in writing, when I take my dog for a walk, I'll talk through an idea for an article, especially for professional articles. And I'll use that transcript through ChatGPT to get a first draft that I can then go back and write. I have an article on LinkedIn where I walk through how I did this, but it was built off of a book I wrote using ChatGPT the first day I ever used it. I was sitting in my couch over Christmas, my dog sitting on my lap, and I knew I should have done real work, but who wants to do real work over the Christmas break? So I'm like, I'm going to play with this new tool. Once I realized it could do, I'm like, how far can I push it? Well, I used ChatGPT to give the outline, then to write the draft. I got a book written. It was only about 11,000 words, but a book written in about 53 minutes. I then used other tools available to get it published on Amazon. The whole process took me about 3 hours. And since then, it's made me a couple of bucks. I've never even read it. I have no idea what it really even says. But it was this whole idea that you could generate this quick. It was entirely a case study for that purpose. The whole beginning of the book and the whole description of it basically says, don't buy this. This is a case study. But you can do it. I took it a little bit further with a professional book I was working on, was able to get to 40,000 words in about 2 hours. It's not the words I like. I think it's a little generic. I think it has no soul. But God, if I can get a first draft, even just a vomit draft, in a couple of hours that I can then work off of, it saves me from the blank page. And I hate the blank page. So again, I find that a really super useful way to do things. In the classroom, I also like using it because it's going to allow me to create a whole bunch of different discussion questions on a given case or a reading. And I can then give different questions to different students. Because if I have to come up with 22 different questions on a reading, that's a lot of wear and tear on me. That's a lot of time. That's a lot of effort. And I'm not sure I can really do it. If ChatGPT can do that for me, to give me those 22 different questions, that's phenomenal. If it can give me 2 different discussion things, that's phenomenal. Again, it's just a way that I can do more legwork without actually having to do the work. So I found that a great way to do it. I have students in the classroom have it up when we're talking about things. Use it to ask questions if you need some clarification for what is going on. I mean, if we're sitting here and you're curious and you're like, I kind of want to know, how does ChatGPT figure out what to write? And you don't want to put your hand up, you don't want to ask what's going on, but you want an answer. Well, my students have someone they can ask questions of as we're going through. It's not interrupting class. They're able to ask what's there, and you're getting very quick, immediate responses. I was in a webinar probably about 2 weeks ago. I believe it was Case Western. I could be wrong on the university. But they actually trained one of these ChatGPT chatbots for their financial aid. And that way students could be asking financial aid questions 24 hours a day. And what they saw is that students were asking more questions of the chatbot than they would ask in person. And when they went back and reviewed, because if the question had to be elevated to a customer service rep, they saw them, or whatever you call a customer service rep. But students were asking a lot of questions that would be more sensitive. Like, I can't get my parents' tax return because we haven't spoken to them in 3 years. How do I deal with this? So it was a way for people to get information without having to have that human connection. When I talked with Tampa General Hospital about this, and Dr. Joanne Quinn, who was doing a lot of the studies based on this, you were seeing a lot of patients ask more detailed questions about their own health when they didn't have to talk directly to a person. They were asking more of those potentially embarrassing questions, those other range of questions. And for the most part, ChatGPT, this information was giving them the correct answers. Actually, in one of the studies that was done, I think it's coming up in the near future for publishing, they were saying that the answers that the AI were giving was better than a lot of the answers the doctors were giving because it was completely unbiased. It didn't have any of those other issues involved. So there's a place here where we can use it to extend our abilities both in the classroom and outside of the classroom, where students can get answers in a easier way. So to take this a little bit more practical, just again, teaching business, you could go, how do I calculate the net present value of a project? So again, students concerned, they don't really know what happens to be there. They need a little tutoring help at the last minute. It's going to give the answers. It's going to help them explain what happens to be there. This you can do for code. This you can do if you need a particular Excel formula. If you wanted to edit or read what you've done, you can put it in there. It doesn't necessarily answer the specific question you're laying out or do the homework for you or any of that, but it's a tutor on demand. You're at 3 a.m. and you need help. It's right there and available. Or as I was saying, in the middle of class, if you want to ask a question and not interrupt the class, again, you have this information available. So I think it's a great tool that extends our ability as instructors to be able to do things. Now, AI in academia is not new. It has been around for just a long time. If anyone uses Grammarly in terms of their reading, that's AI driven. If you use autocorrect, similar in way. If you use a lot of the autofill on Google, there you go. If you use any of these tools, well, they're just advancing as we're getting further. So what we're seeing is something that is a natural evolution of the tools that are available, and it's only going to go further. I mentioned earlier that Bing, Microsoft's search engine, is started to incorporate ChatGPT. They've started to put out the betas of people using it, which is going to have ChatGPT powering their search. One of the limitations on ChatGPT as we're using it here is that it's only trained on information up until 2021, and it's not connected to the internet. What happens now that it's integrated with Bing, it's integrated with the search engine, is you're now able to ask it to summarize websites. It can find information online. It's going to be able to bring in this more modern step. Google's not far behind with Bard. That should be coming out in the near future as well. So all search is going to be AI powered by the end of this year. So it's no longer going to be you have to go to ChatGPT to ask these questions. It's going to be in your Google search. It's going to be in your Bing search. I never thought I'd say it would be in your Bing search. Who thought anyone would ever use Bing? But here we are. So it's there. It's going to be available. It's more, in my mind, how we teach students to use it so that they're getting the right information. Right now, how you ask questions of ChatGPT or of any of the AI is very similar to how we had to enter information into Google 15 years ago. I mean, now you can just ask Google a question. It figures out, it knows what you want. But if you remember back to the early days of it, you had to know how to write your search, what you were putting in parentheses, what you were putting with the word and, what you were putting exclude. How you searched gave you better or worse answers. Right now, how we write prompts, how we ask the questions of the AI is the same thing. There's actually a whole field of careers that have just popped up of prompt engineering. So people figuring out, how do you ask these AI tools? How do you interact with these AI tools to get the best possible responses? So like when I started this one out for us, I said acting as an expert. Well, that's a new thing that's figured out since it started. You're telling the AI what you want it to be. You can also ask it what tone you want to write it in. You can say who you want the audience to be. We can restructure what happens to be there And for me, with students and asking or teaching them to ask questions, is what gets kicked out, the answer may not be right, or it may not be exactly what we want. So we can ask it to change things. We can ask it to adjust. Can you rewrite this in a more formal way? Can you write this in a more friendly way? Can you include in additional information? So it's not we copy and paste the question into ChatGPT and that's all that happens. It's a tool that helps us get to the result we want. Now, ethics and limitations. Well, I think this is a phenomenal example of a limitation. We have John Smith, Jane Doe, and Joe Brown were the three experts that ChatGPT gave me to talk about in my outline. I don't know if any of y'all know John Smith, Jane Doe, or Joe Brown, but I'm not good friends with them and I'm not familiar with their research, mostly because they're made up names. But this is area where ChatGPT doesn't have all of the information. If we did this as a copy and paste, which I did as a copy and paste, you're going to catch some of these hiccups, some of these mistakes, some of these places where it's not tied in. So me going from a pure copy and paste of the outline into the presentation isn't perfect. And it's not going to be perfect for our students either. So if we can show them and explain to them that, hey, using this as a tool to supercharge your research, using this as a tool to get your writing to go faster or to go better, using this as a tool to get answers, that's awesome. Outsourcing your actual thinking, outsourcing everything to a copy and paste with AI, that has failures. Right here is a failure. We don't have these experts. We can't quote them. That's not available. But it's the tool we have. Mistakes are going to happen. It can't know everything we're going to do. And this isn't anything new. I mean, I feel very old-fashioned pulling out my TI BA2 Plus calculator, but I've had this, probably longer than most of my students have been alive. But if I don't have parentheses in the right place on this, it's not going to do the right calculation. I need to tell it what to do because it's still a machine. Same is going to be true of the AI, the ChatGPT. So we have it. It's going to make their life easier. This calculator made my life easier, but I still need to include my own thinking on what's involved there. Again, this is a made-up graph. It doesn't necessarily fit there because we don't have this data. This wasn't working around last year. This is, again, another place where it is falling down. But if I was using this as my outline, I could dig up this research. I could say, you know what? This would be a great slide for me to include here, for me to update this information, to have something about how much of academia is using it. Right now, there's been some unofficial polls or not scientific polls about academics who are pro versus against using it in the classroom, how people are using it, different people's response to nature's decision that you are allowed to use it, you just need to talk about it in the footnotes. So we could actually include that information in, again, from the brainstorming side. So we have a lot of information. I think it's a tool that we cannot fight. It's going to be available. Your students are going to use it. Honestly, I think you should be using it. If you're not using it, I'd have to ask why. I mean, maybe you like doing a lot of legwork. You like spending 5 hours when something can be done in 7 minutes. It would make no sense to me. If I can do things quicker and easier, I generally want to do them quicker and easier, especially a lot of the mundane stuff. But we can use these tools to superpower our time So that way, we're not spending our class time. We're not having our students spend their time on the mundane. And this is something that's happened and will continue to happen. And I honestly feel we need to embrace it and see the benefits of it. So one kind of more example on this from in my 15 years of teaching. So we go back to when I was in college and we were doing IRR, which is the internal rate of return. So the internal rate of return, it's basically the R number in that net present value formula. For us to be able to do that without a financial calculator, without Excel, it's a trial and error process. You run through the math once, you plug in one number, you plug it in again, you have, is it a high, is it a low? You're doing the same math multiple times to get to a good estimation. I remember spending a week on that in my college finance class, teaching us how to do that math. I can now teach IRR in a singular formula for Excel in 5 minutes on how to use a calculator. I free up multiple days of class time that I can teach my students how to use IRR, what it means for IRR, what its implications are in their decision-making process. I'm not spending 3 hours teaching them how to do math that a calculator can do for them. I think a lot of the AI is going to do the same thing. It's going to allow us to remove some of the mundane, allow us to free up space in our schedule, allow us to focus more on the application of the ideas for our students, and teach them ways that it's actually going to be useful when they get out to the real world. Because as great as the way we all learned how to do things is or was, we need to prepare the students for the world they're going to live and work in, not the world we were educated in. Because we can think on that nostalgically, it's gone. So what can we do to prepare them for the tools that will be there in the future? So again, I think it's an awesome tool. I think if you're not playing with it, I'd suggest you should. I think you getting around and messing around with it will give you an idea what it can do, what it can't do, and how you'll be able to integrate it into your classrooms. So open for questions or other areas to go down, but that's about the 40 minutes I had on my schedule to blab at you guys.
Hello, Jason. It's Eva Feldman. Hi, I'm wondering, I know you told us some ways that the content that ChatGPT generates is not, kind of fills in goofy stuff. Besides that, like looking for that as an instructor, how are we going to tell when students are cheating? We really stress academic honesty. Do we just say, okay, it's okay for you to use it? I'm really kind of torn there.
Well, I'll give you my thoughts on it on what's there. One, I would push back on the use of it being cheating, because as a stepping stone in the process, I don't view it that way. Now, if you do a copy and paste and they submit it, that's different. Then I'll agree with you that's cheating. But if I use it to help me get a first draft, I use it to help me figure out the outline of my paper, I use it as a tool to help me get there, in my mind, that's not cheating. It's a tool to help you get there. In terms of how you catch if that's what they're doing, well, there are a couple of tools that have come out to start to figure out whether or not something was AI generated, but it's starting to become an arms race. You have the detectors getting better, you have the AI getting better, and that's going to keep going. The best I've seen so far is about 60% accurate in figuring out whether or not something was AI generated. Turnitin has started to incorporate some of those tools, so that will be there. The way I've got around it, or I don't know if get around it is the right word, the way I've dealt with it is I have the students submit to me what the AI kicked out. What question did you ask? What did it kick out? And then what did you turn in? So I basically, in my mind, see it as that first vomit draft. I want to know what changes they made to it. How did they make it better? So I'm not saying in my classes using it is cheating. For me, it's something I actually expect them to do, which means they can't cheat by using it. They have to turn that in. So I have to see what they've used on what happens to be there. Now, I don't do a writing heavy class, but if I did, I think I would actually have ChatGPT or one of them write something and then have my students correct it. Say where it's different, why they would word things different. One thing, if you get into reading a lot of it, that you're going to see is it becomes very formulaic. It's going to end most sections with "in conclusion." It follows a pretty standard format. Most of the sentences are a similar length, so it doesn't have the way humans write of varying length sentences. So there are ways to see it, but I think, again, for me, basically saying, no, it's not cheating, it is a tool. It's a tool I'm making you use, so you can't use it as cheating, kind of removes it entirely from the equation.
Thank you. That was helpful.
Will this cite research if you ask it to? Will it actually write a research paper in APA format if it was asked?
Kind of. I have one colleague, one friend, who has been able through the prompting to get it to pull more accurate research. It's not meant to do that yet. There are other tools that are more focused on that, and I think we're going to see them come out with what's there. Now, again, ChatGPT, this version that what you're seeing is built on OpenAI. You can go to playground.openai. You can actually train your own version of it to do whatever you wanted. So if you took your discipline and you uploaded all of those papers into your instance of it and then told it that it should research through that data, I think you could get it to do it. But ChatGPT itself is not structured to do that. And if you ask it in a half-ass way without really tinkering with it, it'll have inline citations, but they won't be accurate. It'll be like we saw expert John Smith. It'll have fillers in there.
Thank you.
Other things while you guys are doing that, or I can even be really kind of fancy because you guys, like my students, don't want to ask questions. Can you give me some audience questions based on the outline seminar above? So now I have ChatGPT doing your job, guys. I mean, seriously, come on. Literature review and data analysis. Well, I went through Litmaps is one of my favorites. Research Rabbit works well. There's a few others. Cite, I'm going to play with at one point next time I have a paper come up. That's question one. Thank you, ChatGPT. Can AI tools help us identify new research questions? Ooh, that's a good one. I couldn't find the site. It's in my notes somewhere. The only problem is I take too many notes on this stuff. There is a site that will actually draft research questions for you based on the area of inquiry you're looking for. And I've been messing around with it a little bit, and it's great, not just when you put in your first research question, but then it gives you like a dozen variations of it, which may work better with what you have. How can we be sure that the insights generated by AI are reliable and accurate? You can't. That's where, again, we still need to look at what's there. It is trained on data. It is trained on what was on the internet until 2021. Newer things are not included. So it's not the most up to date. Can I provide some examples of how AI tools have been used in educational settings to improve student learning outcomes? Yeah, this is the last couple of months. We've been seeing it put in place more and more. I think some of the best use cases we're going to see at the end of this semester as it's starting to be more widely spread. Most of what we've seen up to this date was very narrow use cases and not as widespread, but now that it's basically everywhere, and these conversations are happening in, well, every institution of higher learning I know of, we're going to see a lot of this coming out. What are some potential ethical concerns around using AI in research and teaching? Well, I think the cheating portion of it is there. Again, I think how we define cheating, how we define plagiarism with it, kind of needs to be adjusted for what happens to be there. Because, God, it's a tool to be used. And not to go off on a whole rant on this, because I'm not sure I'm always the best person to do it, but I think it actually is a huge tool for equity. I mean, some people have family and friends who have done this before, who have this knowledge base, who know how to write papers, who have this available that they can just get on the phone or they can just text. I mean, my cousin texts me with accounting questions all the time. He has that ability. Does every student have that ability? No, we're giving them that ability. It helps give a more level playing field. And think of people who maybe English isn't their first language, or they have, I'm not sure the right term these days, learning disabilities, right? For something they're having difficulty with putting their ideas onto paper. This is a tool that helps them with that. I think it really can be a big thing of equity and inclusion if we use it right. Limitations, yeah, it's the beginning. Again, think of Google 20 years ago. Think of where it is now. Think of Siri 20 years ago. It didn't exist, but just pretend it was there. And where it is now. We're 3 months into this. This is only going to get better, but it's not perfect now. It has a lot of limitations, and not only do we need to be aware of that for our use, but we need to be aware of that to instruct our students. These are the places where this tool doesn't work perfect. These are where it's going to run into a wall. This is where you should look out for not trusting it. What level of technical expertise? At this point, to use what I just did, next to none. Basically, I am not a super tech person. You can do all of this. Again, it's copy and paste. If you don't know how to copy and paste, it's Control-C and Control-V. You can just take things from one place to the other, and most of it is doing it for you. That's actually the beauty of where we are with AI right now, is it's very user-friendly. ChatGPT is responding to the way you and I would normally ask questions. We don't need to put it in logical functions. We don't need to speak in a hierarchy. How can we incorporate into our existing workflows? Look at where you have mundane work. Look at where you have repetitive work. Look at where you need to brainstorm a lot of different ideas. Look at those places where it's time consuming and see what it can do for you. Again, we did, 3 minutes? I got an outline in a slide deck. Well, even if I think the slide deck is garbage, I did the outline in under 2 minutes. That outline, I can do for every one of my classes. I think I meet with my students 30 times. 30 times 2 minutes, that's an hour. I have outlines for every class I'm going to have this semester. I can then go in and tweak it and alter it the way I want it to be there. Well, if I can have outlines for an entire semester of classes in about 2 hours, I'm pretty happy with that. And it also then gives me the benefit that I'm much happier updating my material every semester. I'm more inclined to make sure everything's new and fresh because it's saving a lot of that just grunt work that goes into it. Costs, everything I showed you today, with the exception of Sight and Beautiful.ai, are free. Beautiful AI, I think, is $15 a month. I personally don't think it's worth it. I don't like its slides well enough. And Microsoft, their PowerPoint, is starting to be able to do a similar thing if you use the import outline function. Sight, I haven't used, so I can't really say whether it's worth it or not. If you decide to train your own AI bot, it's relatively cheap. I think it's something like 2 cents for every 700 words you enter into it. So for $1, you're at 3,500 words of what it works off of. Again, I don't think you and I really need to train our own bots unless you have a specific use case, but I think you can easily justify that particular value. And the benefits preserve the human element. I think this makes the human element more. We need to come up with the right questions to ask. We need those good research questions. We need to help identify the relationships between our independence or dependence. We need to actually see what the data comes out with and interpret what's there. So that becomes more important. Again, I don't know about you guys, but I hate the literature review portion for me to write that up. That's a slugfest. I want to know what's there, but if you can give me a summary of the research space quickly, I love you. That's phenomenal. If I get to focus on my research design, I get to focus on the interpretation of my results. To me, that's the research. That's the important stuff. A lit review, writing up some of the background stuff, I'm happy to pass that off. Again, in other places, I say that's why we have research assistants. I don't think we're that fortunate here. But again, it acts like that for us. So again, a phenomenal tool. Thank you, ChatGPT, for all of those questions that my colleagues couldn't come up with. Anything else I can answer from my experience so far?
So you said it is based up to 2020 at this point. Is that just because that's the standard of behind the research curve, or is it a rate of consumption and soon this thing will be up to yesterday? What can you tell us about that?
Yep, this is GPT-3. So this is their third iteration. Right now they're training GPT-4, which I believe they are saying is going to come out before the end of the year. That should be the update on the information. So as new information is made available, it's entered in to train on it. Now, one thing, it's a little bit out there weird-wise, but you can train the model that this is built on whatever data you want. So there's a website, I don't have it on the top of my head, but it basically trains the bots on historical figures. And so you can talk with a historical figure. So you can get in there and you can talk with the only ones on the top of my head are Jesus and Hitler to give you the full extreme of what they have in there. I'm not sure which is the better one to talk to. Probably neither. One's kind of evil. The other would mess with my Christianity. But they can train it on that. So if you took all of your writing, assuming you have your lifetime worth of writing, and you do the transcripts from all of your lectures, we could train the bot so it sounds just like you. And this is where actually, if we go a little bit I say science fiction-y, it's probably like 18 months away. If you took all of your lecture recordings, transcript them, put them into your bot, along with what you have available, along with just a textbook level of information, your student at 3 a.m. when they're studying could ask you a question, and the chat or the AI version of you could respond back, citing examples you used in the classroom earlier that day. So really up to the minute on the particular information. taking that one step even further, there's a company that's doing what they call synthetic avatars, where essentially you go into a room, they take a whole bunch of pictures of you, they have you talk around, and basically, like that little person I had talking at the beginning, it'll be you. So we could have the chatbot version of you with what you talked about in the classroom earlier that day programmed in. So your student talking through a blue jeans or whatever thing could say, hey, professor, can you explain the problem we went over in class? And the digital version of you, the synthetic avatar, is going to go, sure, here's what we went through in class, and be able to answer their questions on the fly. And again, that sounds super holodeck futuristic, 18 months.
I'm curious if anyone has any sense for how many of our students are already familiar with ChatGPT.
Yes. If they've sat in my classroom, all of them.
Right. So I suspect that you're not the norm.
No, and that's from when I asked my students at the beginning of the semester. I would say about 40% of them had said they had played with it in January. So if you extrapolate that out, if you think that's standardized, figure that's what it would have been in January when classes started, and probably more have learned since.
I've introduced it to all of my students and taken the same path that Jason has with telling them that they could use it for research, but using that same model that Jason did, I require the question and the original information, and they have to cite it, obviously, because if it's not their own work, it's if they just paste it, it's generally plagiarism. But I've taken that same path, but I've introduced it to all my students, and some are using it and some are not. Not all my students are using it. The ones that are way ahead of the other students. Let me put it that way. They're doing the research quicker. They're getting their it's even like Jason noted with the questions. It's even posting questions for them easier, and they're the ones that are questioning more in the classroom. So it's pretty interesting. It's pretty interesting to see the results so far. It's pretty good. I've been real happy with it. Like I use it to do all my lesson plans, and I knock them out in minutes. It's great. It's absolutely the best thing out there. I'm right up there with Jason on this.
Do we know if 10 students in the class ask ChatGPT the same question, will they all get the same exact result, or no?
No, it's not all the same. It's going to be similar. So what I know some people have done, if they have a very clear-cut question, is they'll ask ChatGPT and then they'll upload it to turn it in, if they're worried about it being basically a carbon copy. And you'll see if you ask the same question multiple times, it'll have a lot of the same meat to it, but it's not word for word. It's not just a straight regurgitation.
My son tried it a couple of days ago, Jason, and not only it can do literature review and suggest sort of the way to word reports, it can actually write programming code.
Well, that's dead off. Like, I've all intent to sit with my cousins next time I go up to Boston and help them code out a Roblox game. I've been scared to do it. My coding is so ugly at this point in life. But if I can have an AI tool help me cheat, I am all game.
Well, it's not just that, but it does do a really good job breaking down the step by step, just like I did with your presentation or questions. It breaks down even the programming code. You can ask it, write in Java, how would my salary increase over the next 10 years if I get 3% raises every year? And it will write a code and it will break it down step by step. So it is definitely a teaching tool. If we're not using it in academic link, I think it's an opportunity for students who are, as you said, in the middle of the night are struggling and they can't get an appointment, it can help address some of those emergencies. And as Jason said, if we don't embrace it, it's gonna run us over. So that's a new trend and we can't do anything about it, but we can figure out how we can integrate it. And so thank you, Jason, for this. This was a great presentation.
Yeah, I have a question. Some universities are banning it. Some schools are banning it. Are we going to be facing a university-wide policy on the use of AIs? I mean, I'm just throwing that out for discussion.
Well, if we as a university go to ban it, I will definitely lead the insurrection against that, because this is real. This is out there. It exists. It's a tool. We can't pretend it's not there. So it's either we figure out how to work with it or not. And I think when you have major peer-reviewed things like Nature saying it's okay to use, I don't know how we would then say, no, it's bad. I mean, no offense to us, but right. It's Nature. So I think you need to go with what the societal norm is, what the industry norm is. And I think banning it is just going to create problems.
Right.
And I will second.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, I'll second Jason. I just spoke with advisory board member from the Federal Reserve and then a private company in cybersecurity, and both of them said they are already using it and they expect the people coming in have to be able to use those tools. It expedites workflow. It produces better reports faster. So if we don't embrace it, we're not going to produce graduates that are career ready.
Right.
I'm a little concerned about my wife embracing it. She types in a few words, and I get an avatar that's better looking than me, and she's crafted a more compatible me. I'm getting just a little worried.
If that scares you, don't look up Replica with a K.ai. It's an online best friend that supposedly is powered by this, and you can have conversations and all that with. We're right there.
That's scary.
Hi, I'm Longwell. I have a question about your view and how you navigate between. So some of the examples you used, I can see how it's a really powerful tool to take a transcript of a meeting or a brainstorming session of your own thoughts, use it to generate an outline or produce a first draft. Such a powerful tool versus having ChatGPT generate certain answers for you when you're supposed to be critically thinking about the concepts you're learning and drawing conclusions, but instead you're letting ChatGPT maybe pull out those themes and use that as the basis for your first draft. So do you see a difference in those types of maybe assignments, activities, and how do you help your students navigate ethically kind of using the software?
Oh, okay. So from this, I come from a very ethically gray area. I mean, I personally believe morals are those things they paint on walls for most of these decisions. I think for this, it's what actually gets you that particularly right answer. So it's not going to critically think for you. What it pulls out is information. Do you agree with? Do you not agree with? Is that right? Is that wrong? I mean, in this whole talk today, I'm definitely taking a pro-AI stance. I'm evangelizing it. I think it's wonderful. But do you trust every word I'm saying? I hope not. The very first thing I told you was I'm going to lie to you. So you right now are listening to what I'm saying, and you are evaluating, you are critically thinking, what of what I'm saying makes sense? What of it do you think is garbage? I think having ideas from ChatGPT or any AI tool do something similar is kind of the same result. We're going to see what the machine says, but do I agree with what the machine says? Is that what I want to submit, or do I want to adjust what happens to be there? So again, I think depending on the question that you're looking for or what the assignment is, I think how much you need to stress the student's trust of that information, that could change a little bit. But I think that's where it is a point and opinion, but how do they then factor that computer generated opinion into their own analysis?
Yeah, I used ChatGPT for probably about a month. I use it almost every day. My experience is there are some mistakes, and I saw many of the schools recommend the faculties to redesign their assessment. Something, because I copied from some textbook and I throw it at ChatGPT and they generate a paragraph. Looks beautiful. I mean, I tried several different courses from different areas, although I'm not in that subject area, but looks convincing. So I was thinking how we can use it to incorporate into our classes. So I was thinking, well, at least our faculty should learn. I mean, we cannot ignore it. I'm kind of agree with Jason. Embrace it. I mean, if you ban it, probably it won't work. I saw some very good suggestions from other schools. They came from the Center for Excellence in Teaching. Very similar to ask us to redesign our assessment and then to be explicit, open with the software, with the class. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think on some of the assessment, for me, I think it's a good thing on higher education, because when these tools can pass your medical licensing exams, they took a Wharton MBA class and got a B. They passed one of the two sections of the bar. All of these things to me aren't saying that AI is great. It's telling me that our assessment is kind of bad, because it's not then saying that, oh, we have these professionals, we have these smart thinking people. If a robot can replace them, well, our assessments aren't good. How are we really evaluating people's ability to deal with problems, to critically think about them? So I think there is probably a need for an update to our assessment, but personally, I think that's probably a good thing. I mean, I'm a good test taker. I am. My test scores do not represent my knowledge on a subject. You want me to take the MCAT tomorrow? I'll probably do well enough that I don't embarrass myself. Do I have any idea of knowledge? Do you want me operating on you? God, no, I faint at the sight of blood. But it's going to change the way we deal with a lot of problems, because we now have a machine that can do all the cog stuff. Well, how do we then actually evaluate people's actual processing?
That presents us with an issue. One of the things we look at like I work in cybersecurity, and one of the issues we look at for the job market and for the students is to really develop critical thinking skills to evaluate vulnerabilities and exploits and things like that. How do we like this is one of the issues that I've been trying to deal with, is how do I get the student to use the AI but also develop those critical thinking skills that are needed, out in the job market? What's the point where I stop the AI use and work with them on the critical thinking end, and so they don't lose that ability to learn, they don't lose that critical thinking part, because obviously they can't use the AI discover vulnerabilities or to do digital forensics and things like that. So that's a dilemma that I'm facing, in my teaching. And I think this is one of the issues that we may face, is that critical thinking aspect. And hopefully the students don't lose it by overshadowing their use of the AI.
And I think that's how do we incorporate it? And I don't think there's a one go-to answer on that. But again, not to on the other side of it, but if I can take time out of my class where I don't need to teach mechanical skills, like how to use a calculator, that gives me more time to focus on the critical thinking and how to apply the knowledge. So for me, if it takes out that grunt work, those hard skills to a certain level, I can outsource or have my students outsource that to a AI, and we can focus more on the critical and creative thinking. I see that as a win for us.
Right. I mean, I can see that in some aspects, since the technical side of what we do is so integrated into our career, on the technical side. I'm scared that the AI could critically affect the that critical thinking abilities of students, or not let us hone that for students. So there's such a fine line between the AI and the advanced technical skills that the students have in the IT area that I'm a little concerned about it. And separating the two is going to be difficult, I think. It's keeping them on track, essentially, for that. So far, I haven't had the issue, but I can see it happening. I can definitely see it happening. Because I use it every day, so it's really helping me out. But I already know the answer. Okay, they don't. Okay, that's one of the issues I'm facing. That's one of the dilemmas I'm facing. Let me put it that way: is that when I use the AI and I do a lesson plan, I already know the answer. I know if that lesson plan is correct. I know where that is. The student does not. They don't critically know that. I think we're going to I think on my side, or on the IT side, we're going to have a little dilemma there. So I'm just trying to deal with that. And I think it's something I am looking for input here. If anyone has an idea, Sarah, you brought that up in your comment earlier. How do we keep the students critically thinking, especially when they're so entrenched in the technology side already?
Not to disagree, I think students' use of technology, while it's prevalent, in a lot of cases isn't more than superficial. The number of students I know who use their iPhone, use their computer, use their tablet all day, but really don't know what it can do, don't know how to use it beyond clicking a couple of things. On a weekly basis, I'm shocked that they don't know how to use these things because they've never had to. So I think in some of the things like the AI and some of the others, it's almost like we need to teach them from scratch. They're not going to rely on it because they don't know what it could do. They've never had to play around with technology to see what its abilities are. They just know that I click this button, the pretty pictures on Instagram come up, I scroll through it. Not to make fun of them for Instagram, I use it all the time too, so I'm in the same boat. But I don't think they're really messing around to say, oh, this can replace this particular work. I don't think that's as widespread, but that's from my experience, so I could be wrong on that.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. Not enough of my students are using it yet, but I can see it happening.
Yeah.
I can see it definitely happening.
And I guess what concerns me is, I can only speak for my sets of students, and they are definitely path of least resistance of that mindset. And so I guess what I love the power and promise that this offers, and I'd love to see it be a 30% complement to that creative thinking and independent thought process and self-generated ideas and in investigative acumen and with regard to cybersecurity or whatever it is. But my fear is that it's going to be the where they put their weight. That this is going to be the 90% of the heavy lifting for them, and they're only going to want to lift 10% because it's easy. So that's where I'm a little concerned, and again, what that's going to mean. This is like the introduction of the microwave oven, right? I mean, suddenly everything's cooked quickly, and now we're just dealing with processed food and processed food and processed food, and it's been a long time since you've tasted what an apple tastes like. You know what I mean? So it's. But you started the conversation, Jason, with that these are the front end concerns, and so I do think we'll just have to see where it goes and how students choose to implement this, and then we're going to have to stay fluid on this as this develops. Like you said, it's only been 3 months, and we're going to have to see where it all goes on our side and on their side.
And that's, I mean, I think if we do not address it, it definitely becomes the 90-10. I think they will go that route. They will use it. In the same way, if you weren't taught to cook, you only know the microwave. You don't know how to do it. But if you were taught to cook, you know the microwave is going to save you time on things. You can use it to complement the rest of your cooking as the tool that it is. So if we don't teach them, they use it all the time. It's all they know. If we do teach them and we teach them the role of the tool, then it's that superpower or that supercharger that we want it to be. At least, again, us ignoring it, us trying to cancel it, I think that causes the problem we're afraid of. That's not going to fix it. I think the only way we solve the problem is by incorporating and dealing with it.
I agree with that.
I've been wondering about copyright and AI-generated text and products in thinking about preparing our students for how they might use it. It's a very unsettled issue at this point about whether or not a business can copyright something that was, actually written by an AI rather than, one of their employees, engineers. How has that been factoring into kind of the way that you teach students to use these AI tools?
Well, right now, copyright basically says that anything that's 100% computer generated or machine generated is not copyrightable. So you need to show that there is human involvement or a material human involvement in it. So if I took what ChatGPT put here and I just copy and pasted it and tried to sell it, I can't copyright that. Again, you would have to show you went through multiple iterations. It's allowed to help you. You need the human involvement. For me, this has never been an end result. For me, these answers are not you just copy and paste and use it. Again, that was part of what we saw in the slides and the mistakes that popped up. It's never going to be something I put my name to that I'm like, this is my stuff. And I tell my students the same thing. But I did an article while I was flying this weekend on tax tips for creators, which really boring topic, but this time of year, everyone likes it, all that stuff. Well, I could get, I think it was about 2,500 words using ChatGPT, the outline, a lot of the first draft. I did that all while I was sitting on my layover. I then got on the plane and I could go paragraph by paragraph, rewriting it in what I wanted it to be, reordered what was there. And that's the way I teach my students, is that it is a step in the process. What it is giving you is not the end, at least not for anything you want to show people. So I'm not going to say, this is your end result, just copy and go with this. You still want to add yourself to it. I think maybe in some shorter form content, if you were using this for social media copywriting or tweets or posts or stuff like that, maybe you could get away with a little bit more copy and paste because there's not as much room there. But if you ask it to write things and play with it, I think you're going to see that it's not something you would want to put your name on the way it is. Well, cool. We are dwindling down. I have no idea how long these things are supposed to go. They never told me. And honestly, with my whole approach of coming in and we're going to wing it and have ChatGPT give me my outline, I figured asking too many questions would make me seem too prepared and kind of do away with the glamour of it. If there's any questions that pop up as you're playing with it, and honestly, please play with it. Even if you decide you hate it, have a reason to hate it without just outright thinking it's there. I have found it phenomenally useful in my own research. I have found it useful in my writing. I think I've popped out 6 professional articles since the beginning of the year, and I normally would only do about 1 a month. So that to me is phenomenal. It's getting a lot more ideas out of my thick skull into a form that's useful. But if there's any questions, anything else, please email me. The guy Mushak that I said on Twitter, if you're a Twitter person, read through his stuff. It's phenomenal. I think there's a million time savers there. Yeah, and honestly, if I hadn't already beat it to death, I'd ask ChatGPT what a good conclusion was. But I think we've done enough of that. So thank you all for coming, listening to my zealotry, and I hope you drink the Kool-Aid too.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
guys.
Jason.
It's very interesting. Thank you, Jason.